Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. Today I'm happy to welcome back James Nuzzo to the program. Jim, lovely to see you again.
Great to be back with Dr. Joe Unplugged.
And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, and we'll put the link to this very detailed and extraordinary Substack article in the description. But essentially, and it's interesting we're having this conversation this week because Jimmy Kimmel has just been taken off air, had about a week fully paid leave. They said he was cancelled and he's back on air. And I think that's good. I don't believe in censorship, although I do get that he very much celebrated Tucker Carlson losing his job and Roseanne Barr. So, you know, maybe a little bit of your own medicine is a wake-up call. But you were essentially cancelled, and this is the head of your email, by ECU, the university where you worked for 6 years, and essentially for having the wrong opinions, which, I'm obviously showing my age, but previously universities used to be places where ideas were supposed to be contested. And one of the emails, and we'll get to that, and your freedom of exchange, says, yes, we support academic freedom, but we don't really want to have anything to do with somebody who has particular views, which is a little bit contradictory. So, Jim, probably first off, just tell us a little bit about your role at ECU. You were there for 6 years, and perhaps sort of what you were doing there. And, that might be a useful start. Give some background.
Yeah, so I moved to Perth in March of 2019, and that's when my affiliation with ECU started. So over those 6 years, sometimes I was employed research staff, working in the sort of the exercise science department there on studies related to exercise physiology and human neurophysiology. But also I worked in industry for a little bit as well. And at that time, we set up an adjunct appointment for me at ECU with some of the colleagues I'd worked with previously. Mm-hmm. So I sort of had a mix of appointments and affiliations with the university over that time.
Okay. Now, when you say an adjunct, that's a term that probably a lot of listeners may not be familiar with. Yeah. So that's not being an employee as such. What is, in simple sense, what's an adjunct for somebody who's not familiar with the term?
So what happens with an adjunct position, usually it's given to someone that works in industry, but that the university wants to partner with.
Okay.
Because that partnership helps facilitate research to get done, which will eventually have the university's name on it. And that's important to the university because that helps them get more federal dollars. Okay. So when I was here in Perth working for a startup company called Vitruvian that was
which is where we first met, I think.
Yep. They were making a new strength training device, and so I was working as their head of exercise science research. We set up an adjunct affiliation for me with ECU, where basically ECU would sort of get the benefit of any research output that I come up with, and then I get the benefit of having access to ECU's, digital library, all the archives, some of the university software, and just the different things like that, the university email and all that stuff. So it's kind of meant to be, mutually beneficial for both parties to do that.
Enables a little bit of a bridge between universities, and I assume this is all universities, and industry. So you can be doing some research. That's the universities love that. I've had other people I know who said universities are very, very interested in funding coming in and papers and output going out. And for industry, if they're particularly in the R&D space, that's going to be useful for them to be able to partner with universities.
Yes.
All right. So along with all of that, it comes to an end. There's a timeline to it. And from what I've understood from reading your piece, and again, for listeners, it is quite detailed. Follow through it. If you don't want to read every line, I get it. Fair enough, and you don't have to. But you've not done anything wrong in terms of you've been doing research. You've shown up on time. You've done everything that is if you like, expected of you at your end of the bargain. And listen, they've done the same. So if it was just, look, our time is ended, thank you very much, we're going our separate ways, it would probably be the end of it. I think in contracts, not like you can say, I want to walk away, it's been nice, but I want to do something else. And they can say, thank you very much, we don't need you anymore. And that would have been it. We wouldn't be sitting here now. But it's a bit more complicated than that. So tell us a little bit about what alerted you to this being, if you like, more of a hatchet's job than just a parting of the ways.
Yeah, so in March of this year, March of 2025, my adjunct position was up for renewal. Now, it was a bit surprising when I learned that it was not renewed, and that's because I have a high degree of research output. I had ongoing collaborations with ECU researchers, and so there was reason to keep me connected there. So it was a bit surprising. However, over the past...
I'm just going to jump for a second. So output means you're putting out papers, and an ECU gets some benefits from that because they get acknowledgement, even if it's your work and they haven't really done much towards it.
That's
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's
Thanks.
correct. However, in the preceding couple of years, different things had happened to me and stories had been told to me about maybe the school, the School of Medical and Health Sciences, maybe not being so keen on things that I was publishing or writing. And I give a few examples of these stories in the detailed piece that I have written.
Have you got one in particular that's illustrative?
Well, yeah, I'll give you one. So we were running a really difficult experiment with individuals that have chronic fatigue syndrome. And it's a difficult population to try to recruit from because the patients are often in such bad condition that they can't even come into the lab to undergo the testing. So it's difficult to find patients in the community. We had been trying to recruit with advertisements and things like that. We decided to generate a new advertisement, which we were then going to advertise through a different, kind of like a different sort of department within the school. And that had to go to another sort of level of approval at the university. And I was the contact person for the study, or one of them, with my contact details on it. And someone in ECU administration ordered that my name be taken off of the study advertisement because of this sort of stuff that was going on in the background, them not being happy with what I was writing. So that's a bit of a kind of a sabotage. So that was one thing that happened.
Right.
There was also an instance where a high-ranking ECU administrator sort of caught one of my colleagues in his office and was really questioning why that colleague was working with me. So this is information that my colleague then relayed to me.
They're asking your colleague, who also works at the university, and you're working at the university, why they would work with you.
Isn't
that their job?
Yeah, it's like no. So making accusations that I'm sort of anti-female and things like that because of the research that I write on sex differences and things like that.
And I think it's worth saying at this point for people who aren't familiar, your interest is in men's health, and whether the facts are that men have a lesser life expectancy than females, and on a lot of parameters do worse. And that's not to say that women's health isn't important. Of course it is. But men's health is important too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I've been sort of advocating for some more fair discussion when it comes to men's health, and that upsets some people sometimes. So there were things going on in the background leading up to my the March 2025 decision to not renew my adjunct. So I then approached the school and I said, can you please tell me the specific reasons why my adjunct position was not renewed? The school got back to me very vaguely. They wouldn't tell me. And I also lost access to my ECU email. They wouldn't let me regain access for different professional purposes that I needed to finalize. So there were red flags going up that said, this might be politically motivated, this decision. So I decided...
If this happened, you'd have some access to emails for a period of time, I'm assuming.
So what happened was, 2 or 3 days prior to the scheduled end date of my adjunct position, that's when I was notified that it was not going to be renewed. So that basically gave me like 2 days to finalize, to have access to my email, and that was it. But I was never expecting it to not be renewed, so I wasn't preparing for any of that. And I wasn't necessarily expecting to just all of a sudden, I was expecting more of a grace period with my email. I mean, with that important information in there.
Would that be the case? Because I assume people finish up. It's not the first time somebody's finished up as an adjunct. Would that normally be the case? Because what you're describing is the sort of, you're working in an investment bank, they march you out the door with all your stuff in a black garbage bag and you cut off. But in that instance, there's, commercial in confidence and maybe tens of millions of dollars and involved. Here, not.
Yeah, and it's a bit problematic as well because I was just running research studies where we had a lot of communications with research participants and some information about the participants, and I wasn't able to get back into the email to properly upload that to a shared server with my colleagues.
So these projects that were ongoing.
They had just finished up at the end of 2024, early 2025. So we had just finished one of them, and we had plans to do other things. Like I was saying, I was going to keep collaborating as an adjunct, but as soon as they cut off my email, I said, hey, I've got important information in there. Can I just have access to the email for like 1 more week to just finalize my professional business and whatever? And they wouldn't give me access to the email account. So that was another red flag. And then I decided to submit a freedom of information request to obtain, to see if there were any internal communications at the university about me and my adjunct position that might explain what was going on in the background.
So it's all a little bit too quick. And if there is, you mentioned projects finishing up, but there's, some, I think of a better word than tidying up, but there's a tail of activity.
Yes.
You not being able to contact the people that you're working and collaborating with potentially is prejudicial to that ongoing, to the completion of that project.
Yes, that's correct.
Which, again, as an outsider, I would think, well, a university you wouldn't think ordinarily wants to jeopardize a research project.
In fact, they may even have policies from the ethics committee that says this is a very problematic thing that just happened.
I think ethically it could well be.
Yeah.
All right. And again, at this point, there's no questions about you putting out papers or they're not being published or you're not doing the job that you're there to do. Yeah. So, go on about these FOI requests and what they revealed.
So another questionable thing that happened at the same time was I was told very sort of bluntly and multiple times, you are not permitted to use your ECU affiliation moving forward. Now, at the surface, that sounds quite reasonable because the adjunct affiliation was indeed ending. But the way that academic publishing works is that you don't all of a sudden stop using that affiliation because on published papers in the author byline, you always put the institute where you were at when you did the majority of the research. So for any papers moving forward that were associated with all that work I was doing at ECU, my affiliation on that paper should be listed as ECU. And that has been standard practice in academia for decades and is listed basically on every major publisher's website, that's how you do it. And then in the author notes section, you say, Dr. James Nuzzo is now affiliated with company X or university Y.
All right.
That's how you indicate that you've changed. But because they told me, no, you can no longer use this affiliation moving forward, that was also another red flag that they were really trying to distance themselves from me. So that's when, again, freedom of information request. What I obtained was 2 sets of email communications, one from September of 2023 So that would have been like 2
Just
years
18
prior.
months before, yeah.
Yep, September 2023. And then February of 2025, there was another set of email communications. And we can kind of go through them, but basically they both amount to particular people in the school being unhappy with things that I was writing for different venues and things that I was saying on social media.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these things, I mean, you're essentially expressing your opinion on different matters. So the issue, and you weren't saying anything that was libelous or, shall I say, that going to, I'm gonna say,
What wasn't
bring the institutions, but-
defamatory or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was, a couple of things that were shown in the email exchanges is that I had published an essay at the Martin Center for Academic Renewal. So this is a group based in North Carolina in the US,
Yeah.
and they're all about making higher education better. So
Yeah.
it's a group dedicated to that, and they publish really good pieces all the time. And I had written an article for them about the impact that sort of DEI and gender ideology was starting to have on exercise science, which is
Right.
my sort of area of expertise. And in that essay, I was citing a lot of my already published peer-reviewed papers.
Right.
And there were people in the school who saw that essay that was published in September of 2023, and they threw a fit. And it's what got this whole thing rolling.
Okay.
And in the email exchanges you'll see in my piece, they wanted to cancel me right then and there.
Right.
This all happened over the course of a weekend, by the way. All these email exchanges, it happened so quickly. It was such a huge emotional response by, I think, a small group of people in the school who characterized me as being anti-female and anti-this and inflammatory. And you can see all the adjectives they used to
Yeah.
describe me. And what's so amazing about it, Joe, is that these people admit in the emails they don't even know who I am.
But they don't know who you are. You,
They
you
don't know
work
who I
at the
am.
institution. They're having a go at you via email on a weekend.
That's
and
right.
And this is for, and again, I just want to be very clear on this. You've had an essay published in a North American publication, and that essay draws on work that has been published in other publications.
In academic peer-reviewed journals.
We're talking about
Yes.
peer-reviewed publications. You're citing them in an essay,
Yes, my
and
own
that's
work.
suddenly a problem.
That's correct.
And I'm assuming you weren't aware of those exchanges in September of 2023.
That's correct. I was unaware of it all. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the beginning. That sort of lit the fuse, perhaps. Further email exchange. Was there a hiatus then after that?
And so one thing that made it difficult for them to cancel me in September 2023 at that time was, and this is another thing just showing the level of incompetence. Although I was adjunct at that time, I was technically on 2 different research staff contracts at ECU. So they did not even know that I was employed staff. The executive dean in the email exchanges seems to be completely unaware that I was under 2 contracts. And it's only because they contacted people and culture, basically like HR. And HR was like, oh, hey, are you aware that James Nuzzo is also under contract at ECU? He's not just an adjunct.
Okay, so you were an employee on a contract,
Yeah.
and also had this adjunct position.
Which we had set up in industry months when I was
Okay.
not an employee there, but was in industry.
Right.
And so now I was back technically working at the university. And
So you got 2 separate arrangements
Yeah.
for the same institution.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so what ended up happening was people in culture reminded the executive team about academic freedom, and which was very nice to see, and advised the executive dean to exercise caution. Basically, you probably shouldn't cancel this guy. But
Okay.
the people in culture left it a little bit open. In email number 10 that you read in there, the executive dean then says, okay, we're not going to do anything right now, but she explicitly states that they are not going to renew any of my future contracts. So in September 2023, they knew what they were going to do to me years later.
So they've basically been told by HR they can't sack you now, but they've already decided that they want to get rid of you when the opportunity presents itself.
Pretty much. Yep. And then the other set of emails that I got, much more recent, so February of this year, 2025, I had published a critique of gender equity at Curtin University, where Curtin University has about 57 to 60% female enrollment, and they had advertised a job in which the sole purpose of the job was for the individual to recruit more women to go to university, Curtin University, so more women in STEM. And I had published a critique of that philosophy saying, is anyone paying attention to the boys and men in society? They're, sort of a little bit behind in educational outcomes right now. So I published a critique of Curtin University on my Substack, and that got found out by ECU. ECU has about the same ratio of female to male students as Curtin, so they didn't really like my critique because ECU has the same issue.
Okay.
Where they're not paying attention to the male students very much.
So again, I'm an absolute supporter of equal opportunities, but equal is just that. They've already got 57 to 60% female intake, and again, that's fine. That reflects who applies, and I think that's a global trend that we're seeing more women going to universities, and that's absolutely fine. But if you've already got a majority, I find that maybe I'm missing something, that there's a missing, like if it was 20%, you want to go out and recruit more. That's well below 50-50 in the population, but there's already a majority. You sort of think, well, where is the shortage that needs to be overcome? That's a bit harder to understand.
And I would also argue, then where is the equivalent program to go out and maybe recruit more male? So the idea here is, well, we need more female students in STEM because there's less of them. And then I would just say, okay, maybe that's justified. But then why are you not recruiting more males for psychology or occupational therapy? So it's the bias or the imbalance that I point out. And ECU has the same problems, and that's part of why they did not like what I published.
And this was on your Substack, which is your personal Substack. This is not an ECU Substack. People can find out that, yes, there's your day job, but when you're writing your Substack, that's not on behalf of anybody or anything other than yourself.
That's right.
So as a citizen, you're entitled to express your opinion, I would have thought.
And there's a lot of people that agree with a lot of the opinions I'm expressing about men's health and stuff. And the universities just mostly do not want to hear it. They don't really care.
And to me, this is the central issue, that whether I agree or anybody agrees or disagrees with what you write in your Substack, or anybody who agrees or disagrees with what I might say on the podcast, that's fine. I don't, it's not an expectation that everybody has to agree.
Yeah.
But this is a bit different. This is more or less saying, it's not that we disagree with it. It's like, if effectively he either A, shouldn't be allowed to do it, or B, because he's done it, he's not allowed to work here because he's expressed, and please correct me if I'm not really getting this right. Essentially, it's that you are not, in their eyes, allowed to work there, but have an opinion that your, in inverted commas, superiors don't agree with, which seems odd. Well, should be odd in an academic environment because it should be a contest of ideas.
Right.
But increasingly, my observations is that universities are very much about conformity, and if you don't agree with us, then out you go.
That's right. As you know, the piece that I've written is very long, toward the end of the piece, I do basically an evaluation of how did we get to this point.
Yes, and
So how did the university get to the point where they're canceling someone that has basically evidence-based opinions? And I tie it into different programs that the university has adopted over the years, and it's created a very sort of tribalistic culture. You have to be in alignment with this, or we just can't have you here. Basically, everyone needs to think the same way, particularly on the whole sex and gender stuff. And I draw a causal link between these programs and my cancellation, because if you read in email 1, so September 2023, the big emotional email from someone in the school that got it started, they refer specifically to a program called the Athena Swan program.
Okay.
In that email. And they basically say, oh, well, some people aren't being impacted enough by Athena Swan, referring to me.
Right.
Athena Swan is a gender equality accrediting agency that works outside of the university, and it tries to get organizations like universities to become members of it. And then what it does is it says, okay, well, you want to win a bronze award from Athena Swan this year and put it up on your website? Well, you have to institute these particular policies and practices which are meant to elevate the careers of women. As a result of that, universities like ECU adopt certain policies or practices. So unconscious bias training, female-only job advertisements, which I give examples of in my piece. This is all driven by Athena Swan.
Or it doesn't go that far?
Well, I don't know about that. But the point is, the adoption of these certain ideologies stems from being involved with groups like Athena Swan.
This is some sort of global organization, dare I ask, any ties to the WEF or not?
Well, it started in the UK.
Okay.
It started in the UK, and it's started to branch out.
Yeah.
And ECU has gone all in on Athena Swan.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it is what led to my cancellation, because I was questioning a lot of the sort of gender equity stuff that was going on, broadly speaking, in exercise science at universities. And they said, look, no, we can't have that here. We're signed up for the Athena Swan program.
And what you just said then really strikes me, that you're not allowed to question. Because as soon as we're not allowed to question, it assumes we know all the answers. And we never know all the answers. There's a lot that's unknown. So not being able to question, in my opinion, should be, sadly isn't, a total anathema in institutions that are devoted to research, because research by its nature says we don't know, we need to find out, we need to ask questions. If you can't ask questions, like, what are we doing there?
Yeah.
And I think another really important point to make is this supporting research into female health, supporting opportunities for female, that's all good. Nobody's got any issue at all with that. And again, I don't want to paraphrase you, Jim, but really what you're saying is, well, by the way, we can also look at men's health as well. The two are not mutually exclusive. That we want to do A doesn't mean we can't also do B.
That's right.
And doing B is not interfering with doing A. They can coexist quite happily.
The other thing that they don't like is that I often point out when they are wrong. So I point that out in essays and things.
Okay.
So not necessarily my colleagues, although I guess that does happen sometimes. But I question a lot of the existing narratives that are out there, and I do that with data. So with the funding of men's and women's health, what do I do on Substack? I publish what the data are from the NIH. I publish what the funding data are from the NH and MRC.
Yeah.
But no one's really been doing that. And when I publish the data, it's very clear where the bias is. And it's
the data can speak for itself. And people who want to accept, well, I think data has to be accepted, but I also get this interpretation. You're presenting data. People can make of it as they see fit. And they're trying to say you shouldn't be publishing data.
I guess so. It's crazy.
That's sort of the overarching impression. I mean, it just, again, makes me think how, literally just in the last so many days, in the last week or so, Brett Sutton, the CHO in Victoria during the pandemic response, was interviewed on Neil Mitchell's podcast, and basically came out and said, well, looks like we were right. I'm not verbling him here, but essentially, well, there really was never any basis for what we were doing, and we probably got most of it wrong, and a lot of it wasn't necessary. Anybody would have, but again, nobody was allowed to question it. Yes. Maybe if people had been allowed to question it, we might not have had so many livelihoods lost, so many delayed diagnoses, and don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But not being allowed to ask questions and not being and being castigated for presenting data, is a very sad indictment on any institution of learning. And my suspicion is that this happens at a lot of universities these days.
For your listeners, you can go to a website called The College Fix, which I reference in my piece. The College Fix maintains a database of cancellations, of academic cancellations. And you can just see how they have stacked up over the past few years. And it's always happening to people that are questioning a certain type of narrative that is happening. So this type of stuff that I was questioning, canceled, it's the same type of things that are getting canceled. And that brings us into a sort of a scary place where that sort of alternative viewpoint is not being heard. And when it pops up, they try to squash it as much as they can.
And then it becomes an echo chamber, and everybody's right because everybody agrees with everybody else.
That's right.
At which point you can't have any more progress because we're already right. And if any notion of any description can't withstand questioning, then you've got to say, well, how solid is the basis of that notion? I think people should always be questioning. I'm not sure we're questioning enough as a society, and I'd include sadly, a lot of my colleagues in medicine as well. I don't think collectively as a profession we ask enough questions, and this is clearly broad. But any notion or idea or theory or practice should welcome being questioned because A, if it can withstand a good, and B, all right, well, we thought of all of this, but hey, we hadn't thought of that aspect, so we're going to incorporate what you've raised into what we're doing. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be the end of what we're doing, just we were incorporating it.
One of the amazing things about my cancellation story is that the people responsible for the cancellation, they never actually talked to me. So the executive dean never once communicated with me about any of this.
You never asked your side of the story?
No, they never contacted. They didn't even contact me to say, hey, we saw this thing you published in September 2023, and we're not happy about it, and we need to have a chat, so you need to come to my office. Even that didn't happen. I mean, I probably wouldn't have agreed with what they would have said, but we would have had that conversation. Yeah. I would have said, look, you're making all sorts of accusations about me, which are not true. Here I am as a human. You've never even met me before. Why don't you listen to my side of the story? Here's where I'm coming from. Here's the data. Here are the peer-reviewed papers I've published on this topic. But we never had that conversation because they're hiding in the background behind their emails over the weekend in their little small group. And so this is what's happening at universities right now. It's very problematic.
Absolutely. I suppose from one end of the spectrum at the top to another end of the spectrum, you do end on a very positive note. And I'd like you to recount the story of your discussions with one of the baristas on campus.
Yeah, so as you know, I've done some research in the past on childhood sex differences in strength and fitness. And I had set up a GoFundMe account to help support that research, in part because some of this sort of stuff was happening in the background, and I needed to start doing my own independent research and get my own funding. So I set up a GoFundMe account for that. It's still open, by the way. And I was on campus one day. I went to go get a coffee, And I walked in, and one of the individuals that works at the cafe there, I hadn't been in a few weeks, and the individual comes up to me, and they've got an envelope, and they're kind of smiling and kind of showing me the envelope, and I'm just like, well, what is that? And the individual's like, yeah, just take it. Just take it. I don't know, what is it, you know? And we're kind of smiling. And he's like, it's for you, it's for you. So I took it, opened it up. It's got a $50 note in it. And I said, what is this for? And the individual said, I want to support you. I want to support your research. This is for your GoFundMe account, but I just wanted to give you the cash instead, you know, so the GoFundMe doesn't take the sliver off the top. And just said, I really, I follow you on social media. I agree with the things you're saying. And this individual, works in a university cafe, and they interact with a lot of the professors. Mm-hmm. So they know the personalities, they know all the drama, they know what's happening there.
Yeah.
And this individual is also sick and tired of it, but they don't really have much of a voice. I mean, they're not an academic.
Sure.
They're working in the cafe.
Sure.
But essentially, it's like you kind of speaking for me. The research you're doing is important. Things are getting very crazy in the whole sphere of sex and gender right now, and I think you are doing the right thing here. I want to support you. So that meant a lot to me, and I do get other forms of that in the way of like emails and messages and donations. So I'm very appreciative of that.
And I think that's a really good point, that there is in society, you've got the little guy, for want of a better term, who doesn't have much of a voice these days, and you have the elites who are in positions of power. They bleat about how they're oppressed, but they actually are in positions of power, who are totally detached from the people who they purport to represent.
Yes.
And you got to think that for the one person who's going to reach out like that, there's going to be a not insignificant number of others who are either going to meet you or come across you, but are of a similar view. So yes, that hopefully, Jim, through all of this, gives you some solace and, shows that you're on the right track. Again, not for everybody, and we're not saying everybody has to agree with you, and you're obviously not saying that either, but that what you are doing, and will in your own way now hopefully continue to do, has value and is worthwhile. And, I think the way you've conducted yourself through all of this is absolutely exemplary. I'm not entirely convinced one can say that for others. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your story. And again, for listeners, we'll have a link to the Substack, which you can go through and read. And also, if you go to the bottom, if you want to support Jim's work, there's a link at the bottom of so you have to scroll right to the bottom, but you can do that and click on that link and support Jim's work.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.